So why baptize a baby? I mean, it's a question that has, literally split Christians apart for centuries. On the surface, it can seem kind of weird, right? Counterintuitive. But for some of the biggest Christian traditions, it's an absolute cornerstone. So today, we're going to break down an argument that completely reframes this whole debate. It's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so let's dive right into the big one. The question that really makes infant baptism, or pedobaptism if you want the fancy term, seem, well, totally illogical. We all know a sacrament is supposed to be an outward sign of an inward faith. So how can you possibly give that to a baby, someone who can't consciously have that faith yet? It's a real head scratcher.
And here it is, right? The core tension, laid out plain and simple. On one hand, you've got this requirement. Sacraments need a response of faith. But on the other hand, you've got the simple reality. Babies just can't consciously do that. They can't say, I believe. So what gives? How do you possibly bridge that gap? For traditions like the Baptists, this isn't just a small problem. This contradiction is seen as the absolute Achilles heel of the whole argument. From their point of view, it makes the entire practice of baptizing infants logically impossible, just untenable. But what if we're all looking at this the wrong way? This is where our explainer today takes a really interesting turn. What if the problem isn't the practice itself, but the assumptions we're bringing to it? The argument we're digging into today says, hey, maybe we've got two really basic concepts completely wrong, and that's messing up the whole conversation. All right, first up, we're going to rethink grace and symbols. And you'll see how just shifting our perspective on these two little words can, believe it or not, change everything. This is where we start taking the old argument apart. Okay, so the old way of thinking about grace, it's kind of like picturing it as some sort of divine substance, like a spiritual energy or power that God sends down through these special channels like the sacraments. It's almost like getting a spiritual power-up or a dose of grace. But check this out, because this is where the new framing gets really interesting. In what's called a personalist view, grace isn't a thing you get at all, it's a relationship you're invited into. It's God's personal attitude of favor toward you. Think of it as God starting a conversation with you. And this is a really crucial point. It totally simplifies the picture. See, it's not some four-part cosmic delivery service. God sends a substance called grace through a sacrament to us. Nope. It's a direct three-part encounter. God relating to us through the sacrament. That fourth ingredient, the substance, is gone. All right, the second big idea we need to rethink is symbols. We tend to see them as, mere symbols, right? Like they're just optional add-ons to real life. A picture of a thing, not the thing itself. A photo of you and your best friend isn't your friendship, it just represents it. But this personalist view flips that on its head. It says symbols are absolutely essential. And when you think about it, it makes sense. How can any personal relationship even exist without symbols? I mean, try having a friendship without words, without gestures, a handshake, a text message. You can't. Symbols don't just picture the relationship, they are the very stuff it's made of. They create and sustain it. Okay, so now we've got these two new tools in our toolbox, right? Grace is a relationship, and symbols are how relationships are built. With that in mind, we can go back and look at the whole problem of infant faith in a completely new light. And this really lays out the shift perfectly. We're not asking the wrong question anymore. The wrong question was, can an infant receive a jolt of divine power? That's a tough one. The right question is much simpler, much more human. Can an infant have a personal relationship? And the answer to that question is, of course, yes. We see it literally every single day. Babies respond to their mother's voice, even in the womb. They quickly learn to trust their parents. They figure out who's family and who's a stranger. They are built for relationships from the get-go. And this leads to a pretty profound challenge. Think about it. If we all agree that infants can trust and relate to human persons, why on earth would we assume they can't trust and relate to God? Denying that a baby can have faith sort of accidentally implies that God is less present or less available to a child than a human parent is. And that can't be right, can it? Okay, this next part is the key. It's the central analogy that just unlocks this entire argument. It's so simple, so powerful, and it's something every single one of us has seen. Get ready for the aha moment. The argument goes like this. The question, should we baptize babies, is basically the exact same kind of question as should we talk to babies. Just let that sink in for a second. I mean, seriously, think about it. Why do we talk to newborns? A parent speaks to their baby. The baby has no clue what the words mean, right? But does the parent stop? Of course not. They keep talking. They speak so the baby will eventually learn to understand. They're using symbols, words, tone, touch, to build that relationship. Well, this argument says that's exactly what God is doing in baptism. So baptism gets completely reframed. It's not some one-and-done magical transaction. It's the start of a conversation. It's God's opening line to a child, inviting them into a relationship that's meant to last a lifetime.
All right, let's bring this home with our last section. And it's a really fascinating challenge about being a consistent parent. So the author brings up this kind of wild story about the skier Peekaboo Street. Apparently, her parents let her choose her own name because they didn't want to impose an identity on her. Now, that's pretty extreme, I know, but it actually highlights something that all parents do, whether we realize it or not. Because the reality is, every parent imposes an identity on their child. We give them a name. We teach them English or Spanish or whatever. We give them a whole cultural framework to live in. We are shaping them from day one. And this is key. None of that is religiously neutral. And think about this. A lot of parents who might say, "No way, I'm not baptizing my baby," will have absolutely no problem teaching that same kid to sing "Jesus Loves Me" or say the Lord's Prayer before bed. In a way, they're already treating their child as if they belong in this covenant relationship with God. They're already acting like the child is part of the story. And that leads us right to the final, really provocative question. If you give a child a name, if you give them a language, if you're already giving them an identity, why would you then withhold the sign of the covenant? Why not give them the symbolic mark that says you belong in God's family, in this relationship? It's a really powerful question to think about, no matter what you believe.